Welcome back to Sprague Homestead. I'm Nikki, and today we're going to be talking about broad-breasted versus heritage turkeys and what the differences are. So one question we get every spring is, what is the difference between the broad-breasted and the heritage turkey? What you usually see at the feed store is generally going to be a broad-breasted. They come in generally 3 colors, whites, bronze, and then we've seen a lot of blacks this year. Whereas your heritage turkeys, you usually won't find these in the feed store. They're generally going to come out of either a hatchery catalog or they're going to come off of Craigslist or something like that from somebody breeding them. Heritage turkeys come in a wide variety of colors. Some of your better known ones are going to be your standard bronze, your bourbon reds, your blue slates, chocolates. You can get a midget white, royal palm. There are lilacs. There are Jersey buffs, which you don't see very often. Black Spanish. You've got a large, I think it's called a giant white. I've seen them marketed as a couple of different things. Narragansett is another one that you see. And then you've got a whole bunch of other specialty colors like auburn and sweetgrass and some of those. So lots of colors in the heritage varieties, not so much in your broad-breasted. So beyond color, what is the big difference? Well, you've got to think of the broad-breasted very much like the Cornish cross. These guys are bred for meat production. They're double-breasted, so that means that they can't naturally breed. They're simply too heavy, and not only can the females not get into position, the males really can't either. This also means because they're so much larger and the double breast, they have a tendency to have heart failure, usually by the age of 2. So they don't live very long, but they are primarily just a meat production animal. This is the stuff that you see in the commercial turkey business, where they are artificially inseminated to produce eggs, but they don't really have much of a lifespan. These guys are bred to be butchered at 4 to 5 months, 6 if you're looking for an exceptionally large turkey. Now, on the flip side of this, your heritage birds are going to be naturally occurring. These are domesticated birds that were usually developed from European wild turkey. There actually are no turkeys indigenous to North America. Everything has been transplanted here. So they were all Spanish birds or English birds that were brought over during colonization. So there actually aren't any naturally occurring. Of course, now we have wild populations, but they weren't here originally. So these are an implant from Europe, the European countries. Sorry, I'm getting a little cold. So what you'll see is they grow much more slowly. They will mate naturally. They can lay and hatch their own eggs. But they are going to take almost twice as long to get to butcher size. So what we say in heritage birds is really you're looking at a 9 to 10 month of age before they're butcher ready. Now remember, your broad-breasted can be ready at 4 to 5 months. So these guys take twice as long. There is a good argument for the fact that they have better flavor. I find that the meat has more taste, but you know, to each their own. If you grew up and are used to doing broad-breasted, you'd probably be fine with them. So when we talk about bigger, how much bigger? Well, let's go ahead and meet Bob. And Bob was our broad-breasted that we grew out this year for Thanksgiving. All right, so this is Bob. Bob is a broad-breasted tom. He is just 5.5 months. We got him at the beginning of May, and today is October 17th. And Kanan just weighed Bob, and this kind of will show you some of the difference between these guys. Bob is 54 pounds as of right now. How big he'd get if we'd let him go, I really don't know. But this is going to be a challenge enough to get him butchered and get him into the freezer. He's going to take up quite a bit of freezer space. So this is what a broad-breasted tom at 5.5 months looks like as far as size. All right, so Bob, like I said, is a broad-breasted. Now let's go ahead and meet Sulley. Sulley is our blue slate turkey. All right, so this is Sulley. Sulley is a blue slate. He is a little bit younger than Bob was, so we waited to do this part of things. But Sulley's going to be staying as a breeder, so we're just going to get his live weight. So he is right now 5.5 months, which is what Bob was at Butcher. And you can see how much smaller this bird is compared to what Bob was. And I'm going to let Kanan get on the scale and get me a weight for him so we can see how big he actually is.
All right, so I was 181 pounds without the turkey, so let's see what I am with the turkey. I'm about 204 pounds with the turkey.
23 pounds?
So he's about 23 pounds, 23 or 24, so.
So a little under, or right at half the size of what Bob was.
Right, Bob was 54 alive, he is, say, 23 or 24.
So a little under half.
Slightly under half of what Bob weighed.
So as you can see, quite a difference at that same age category. Quite the difference in size between the boys. Now what about the girls? Now we did a broad-breasted in the hens as well this year, just out of fluke. I just bought 2 poults and we ended up with 1 boy, 1 girl. But this is how Betty's weigh-in turned out.
All right, so this is Betty. Betty is a broad-breasted bronze turkey. She's 6.5 months old, and we're going to weigh her in today. So, with the turkey, I weigh right about 211 pounds. So without the turkey, I was 175. So she's looking at about 36, 37 pounds live weight.
So not quite as big as Bob, but definitely a big girl. Now, on the flip side of that, I actually hatched a chocolate turkey right around that same age. It was about a week younger than Bob and Betty, and we named it Fred, because you can't tell. But it did turn out to be a female that we will be retaining for our program. But here's how her weigh-in went.
All right, so this is Fred. Now, we named her when she was early on, so Fred is a girl's name in this case. Now, she is going to be 6.5 months old. She is technically 1 week younger than Betty. So now let's get a good weight on her live. Let's say right at 199 pounds with her. So she is approximately 18 pounds alive. Now, if you remember back, Betty was 45. No, Betty was 36 pounds live.
Yep.
So she is literally half the weight of what Betty was for a week younger.
So again, as you can see, a huge, huge size difference. Now, if we were going to butcher the 2 heritage birds, like I said, we wouldn't be doing that until at least next year. Just because there's a huge size difference. Now, the heritage are not ever going to get quite as big as what we see in our broad-breasted. Now, I looked online and could not find a definitive answer on how big these broad-breasted can get. I've heard stories of toms butchering out, processed at 60 pounds. So I'm assuming they can get a whole lot bigger than what we did. Now, that's not going to be the case in your heritage birds. We've had some very large toms that finished out at about 40 to 45 pounds, but those are big year and a half old toms. Typically, what you're going to find is more like 30 to 35 pounds at the 9-month mark. With your hens at full maturity, so about 2 years of age, they're really only going to be about 25 pounds tops. Every now and then in your bigger breeds like your Narragansetts and your standard bronze, sometimes you'll see a hen that'll tip the scales all the way at 30 pounds, but that's going to be a fully matured hen. So you can see that there's a huge size difference here. So why would you raise one over the other? Well, obviously, if you're going to try and breed them, you would want to do something that's a heritage breed. But if you're going simply for meat production, then the broad-breasted is really what you want to do. They do grow much, much quicker. There's more meat to them. And because of their health issues, they tend to have joint issues and heart trouble. They tend to be far more docile. With your heritage birds, you will get some toms that are somewhat aggressive. They're breeding males, especially in that first year as they kind of get the testosterone and it's their first mating season. So definitely something to keep in mind. But between the two, when we talk about things like dress out percentage, what we're really looking at is about an 80 to 85% live to processed weight on your broad-breasted, and you typically go 75 to 80% live to butcher weight on your heritage birds. Now, for both of them, you tend to lose the same roughly 5% of the weight in bone, so that's kind of not a factor between the two. But there is going to be a definite difference, because remember that broad-breasted is double-breasted, right? So it's developed for more meat. So you will get a little bit less percentage-wise from your heritage birds, and like I said, a whole lot less of it. And since we're talking about dress-out percentages, I'll try and stick in a little clip here of both Bob and Betty post-butcher. Bob was actually 45 pounds. Remember, he was 54 live, so he's 45 pounds processed. Betty went from 36 to 29. So we kind of did the math, and it's pretty close to around 80. Bob was closer to the 85% mark, but typical dress out percentages for what they are. So one other question I always get about these guys when you're talking about raising turkeys is I always get somebody who can't bear to butcher the broad-breasted that they bought because they're so docile, and they ask, well, can I keep them and breed them, crossbreed them to a heritage bird? The answer is really no. It doesn't really work very well. Every now and then what you see in the feed store will be a hybrid, and if you're lucky enough that you get a hybrid that's not a huge grower, you might be able to hold a hen back if she's not hugely double-breasted and not a ginormous bird. The toms, it never works out. Physically, because of where the breast sits and because of how heavy they are, they just can't get the mating done. And even if they could, your concern at that point would be actually injuring any hens that you tried to put on them. Like I said, if you can get a hybrid female, and sometimes you do get a hybrid hen, you can put a heritage tom on top of her. A lot of times that'll work. Don't let her try and hatch her own eggs. Typically what happens is they're just too heavy and they tend to smash their own eggs. But if you're going to be incubating or something like that, you might be able to do it. But turkey hatching is not for the faint of heart anyway. I've talked about this in other videos, that poult mortality tends to be pretty high. It's a specialized diet. It can be a little bit more difficult to get them actually breeding the way you want them to breed. But definitely two broad-breasteds together, not going to be able to work. You also have to remember that the overall lifespan tends to be pretty short. A really old broad-breasted is 2 years old. Every now and then you'll hear one that went older, but most of the time, about 9 months to a year, their hearts give out or they're so arthritic they can't move anymore. On the flip side of that, your heritage birds will go much, much longer. We actually have 7-year-old hens that are still laying and 7-year-old toms that are still fertile, and we're still producing chicks out of them. So for a long-term solution, when you're talking about turkey breeding, your heritage definitely has more longevity. All right, so that's our video talking about the differences between your broad-breasted and your heritage turkeys. And today is Wednesday. Tomorrow is actually Thanksgiving, so I'm going to get Kanan to do this up and have this out tomorrow for Turkey Day. We hope everybody has a great Thanksgiving and that you're staying warm and have a good time with your friends and family. We will see you next time. Happy homesteading.